ॐ स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः. So, this Sunday we will be discussing about the visions of Sri Ramakrishna, which is part of the Great Master, the Sadhak Bhav, or the second part. So, we discussed in our previous class. Of course, we are having a special session every Tuesday, a reading followed by a little bit of explanation. But we are doing it in great detail on Tuesdays. That is, some devotees, mostly from Leicester, they do the reading, and based on that reading, if there are some things that need to be discussed, we discuss. So it's more of a reading, but still, this book is so important that even just a casual reading, and if you read it online also, because when you are reading it on your own, you may skip certain things, but when somebody else reads, you may be able to uh, find out certain things which perhaps would have escaped your notice. But anyway, it is worth reading minutely, word by word, because each one of the paragraphs that we are discussing every alternate week is written by Swami Shardananji based on his, not only his understanding, but his intuitive understanding, but most of the experiences he said he himself had. So this is something wonderful, that to know that somebody who could tune his mind, at least in a subtle way, with Sri Ramakrishna before attempting to write his biography, which is a difficult task. Normally, biographers, they have an objective view, an objective treatment where you see the person whose biography you are writing as an objective event, a person and your, as a subject, your subjective experience of the objective reality that you see. That is why Nivedita was not confident, Sister Nivedita, when she was asked, because everybody was hesitating to write the life of Swami Vivekananda, biography of Swami Vivekananda. So when she was asked, she said, I'll write, but she gave a unique name. She was very honest. She gave a unique name to that book, The Master as I Saw Him. Here, the title is The Great Master, or literally, the name of the book should have been Sri Ramakrishna and His Divine Play. So, the divine play, concept of divine play, where it is not a ordinary biography. So, in English, there is a word which is used. They don't say biography. When such great prophets and incarnations and great people uh, are concerned, they call it a hagiography. Hagiography. That is the word they use. If you see the dictionary, it is a biography of great people. And when anybody attempts to write this type of biography or hagiography, he has to be, if not equally spiritual, he has to attain a degree of spirituality to be able to write this book. So, Swami Shardanji would have attempted to write this biography. Of course, the information that he is sharing has been collected from various people. But still, to interpret those events which are not just historical, it's a divine play, you can say, that's the right word. Lila Prasanga, that is the Bengali, which has been translated by Swami Chetananji as Sri Krishna and his divine play. So that is the idea. So it is the divine play of Sri Ramakrishna. And when that divine play is described by somebody who, it's not an autobiography, mind you, though there is a book compilation. I should not say it is a book, it is a compilation of Sri Ramakrishna's utterances about himself, those which were recorded either by Master Masha or somebody else, They were recorded when they were spoken much later. So if Sri Ramakrishna says something about himself, all those quotes or all those conversations or whatever he said about himself has been put together chronologically to appear as if it's like a biography in his own words that can be termed as autobiography. Normally, autobiography of many people, like Mahatma Gandhi, wrote his own autobiography based on the notes and based on the diaries that he kept. Maybe later on he felt that I should honestly write something about myself, my struggles. And they say it's a very honest autobiography because he has not tried to hide anything. But very few people will be so objective. I mean, they will obviously the autobiographies will be subjective. So, what they think of themselves, that is a different thing. If Sri Ramakrishna had done that, perhaps he would not be writing his own autobiography. But whatever he said about himself has been classified in that wonderful book. It's available on internet. If you just go, you can download in on Kindle or any other. You don't need a hard copy, but it is worth reading. It is known as Swami Vivekananda Sri Ramakrishna on himself. It is based on another book, Swami Vivekananda on himself, which was compiled long ago in 1963. So they also felt, one Swami felt, Swami Ekatmananji, he felt that if he consults all the available writings on Swami Vivekananda, the different biographies that were published during his lifetime and after, uh, incidentally, you will be surprised to know that Swami Vivekananda's biography was written when he was very much alive, which is very rare for any person of his stature. It was in 1893. 1893, yes. No, not 93, 1897. His bio 1896, end of 1896, it came out in early 1897 when a Gujarati biography of Swami Vivekananda was published. Though it was a very short biography, say 35 pages, large size, A4 size pages, and it formed part of a book known as Mahajan Mandal. That is means a biography of great people, so which India had produced, and also many of them were alive. So there is Sri Krishna's biography also, which is not a surprise because he had passed away in 1886. So in 10 years, there was enough material to write a biography. But surprisingly, he included the life of Swami Vivekananda. Obviously, Swamiji was not aware that his biography was being written by somebody while he was still alive, because the biography ends with a very interesting paragraph. It says the Swami is still in America. That means he was yet to come back to India. The 97, the famous 26th January landed on Indian soil of 1897 was after this biography was published. And surprisingly, the author of this book, who was from Gujarat. It was a Gujarati biography, even before the Bengali or the English biography of Swamiji was written. So he consulted, later on we came to know what was the source material. How did he know so much about Swamiji? So it was Swami Vivekananda's Guru Bhai, Kalipad Ghosh, uh, who was at that time staying in a place, he was staying in Ahmedabad, and he was the dealer for a British paper firm which was very popular in those days. British were the uh, manufacturers of paper. It was obviously manufactured in England and shipped to India. And he was the head of the distribution network, Lion Paper. That was the name of the brand name. So naturally, all the publishers were known to him, Kalipada Ghosh. And he was very dear friend, I mean, very dear brother disciple of Swami Vivekananda. So he was, of course, a householder, and it was in his house that Swami Vivekananda stayed before he left Mumbai by that ship which took him to America. So before going to America, he was already known. But based on that, a person who has not yet become famous Obviously, you can say after going to America, Vivekananda was discovered by the world. In India, nobody really, he was just wandering. Few Rajas like Mysore Maharaja, Raja of Ramnad, where he landed, they knew Swamiji because they came in contact, they could recognize his greatness. But what about the others? I mean, general people, they were not even aware of Sri Ramakrishna's life so much. Uh, but this biographer, Magan Lal Patel, he wrote this book and he says his all the information he got about Swami Vivekananda was from Kalipad Ghosh, who gave him all the details, how he came in touch with Sri Ramakrishna, what did he say, how did he compare him to Keshav Chandra Sen, and how could Sri Ramakrishna uh, discover his genius and predict that he would go and preach Vedanta all over the world. All these things are mentioned in that biography. Though it appears in those days, anybody who would have read that biography would have been totally shocked because he is anticipating. Nobody, as I repeat, when he left Chennai or when he left Madras, which was known as Madras in those days, Allah Singh and all collected funds. Then he went to Bombay, and then the Raja of Khetri uh, provided him with his dress. And for his voyage to Chicago, he didn't know where to go, what to do. It was so unknown and uncertain. An unknown monk left India. So, based on that information, and of course, the Chicago Parliament of Religions, whatever little news came to India through newspapers, and there was no television and other things. So, based on that, and based on, of course, Kalipad Ghosh's conversations, this Maganlal Patel wrote a beautiful biography, small biography. It's really interesting to read that because there he says the Swami has become famous in America and he has traveled across the whole continent and also been to Europe and England. Of course, he came here and went back to America. And then in 97, finally from England, he suddenly felt that he should go back to India. And he left. He just told his disciples here that I have to go now, when his work had just started in 1896 in December. So Nivedita and all, they were all keen that Swamiji continued his English work, but suddenly he felt that he should go back to India. And then he goes back. Then he came back again in 99, 1900. He went to America, and that was his second visit. But before that, when he left, this biographer writes, he is, after a very successful tour of America, mind you, he's not even stepped, he has not even reached Ramnad, where he was given that heroic, I mean, that huge welcome. Raja of Ramnad himself wanted to draw the carriage. So those things had not happened. But this strange to know that this Patel, Maganlal Patel, was from a city in Gujarat. Maybe he had met once or twice Swami Vivekananda when he was in Bombay in Kalipad Ghosh's house. But that would not have been sufficient to write a biography of. It's a short biography, but he says we can now imagine how the hero will be welcomed in India when he finally lands. He is going to land, his ship is going to land sometime in January of 97. That is what we are told. That is how he ends the biography. Because after that, that book was published. Imagine a person's biography is being published when he's still alive. And then he says he will receive, perhaps because of the success that he has achieved in America and other places of Europe, India will receive him. They will give a rousing welcome. And that is what happened. So there are biographers who can write this kind of biography. Maganlal Patel, of course, was a just ordinary biographer. He was not so well known. And even afterwards, though he started a famous newspaper, he was not so well known. So you can imagine if Sardananji writes a biography, much after, long after Sri Ramakrishna passed away, based on a lot of evidences, first-hand evidences, which he himself heard from the master and also heard from people who had seen Sri Ramakrishna when he came to Dakshineshwar. Many of them were alive and also visited Kamarpukur several times to understand how they looked upon him in childhood. Many of them were alive because Sri Ramakrishna, as you know, passed away at the age of 49. 49 and a few months, he didn't complete 50. But there were people who were in their 80s who would have seen him as a young child, as Gada in Kamarpukur. So, but still, based on those information that he gathered, he wrote this biography or hagiography as it is known, where you have to have some kind of spiritual insight. Otherwise, nobody could have written this biography. It's impossible that a biography of such highest order. That is why I'm saying it is every line is a matter of experience. So if you read, there is a wonderful book on Shardanandji. Very little is known about his brief visit, like a rolling river free. That is the title. A very well read, well written book of his brief life in the 2 years or 3 years he spent in England and in America. If you see that, the amount of impact he had on the Western disciples, you can Swamiji, understand the reason why Swamiji called him back. Though he was very successful, not only here, but also in America with Abhedanandji, the New York work and so many things he had just started. And suddenly, Swami Vivekananda calls him for a very important role to run the administration of the Ramakrishna mission because he knew he would die soon and he wanted a very capable person. And he had so much trust on this Guru Bhai. And then later on, when while he was in England, one important incident happened. Max Muller, Swamiji met Max Muller alone. Shardanji had not come. So Max Muller wanted to write a biography of Sri Ramakrishna. So when Max Muller showed interest, obviously he wanted somebody who could give a very interesting and authentic account of, because Max Muller obviously was very well known in Oxford and he was a pioneer uh, in the sense he was the one who wrote the famous, or compiled, you can say, with the help of lot of scholars, the famous series, the Sacred Books of the East. It's a wonderful series of books that were published by Oxford University. And he was residing in Oxford at that time. That house is still there, the house where Swami Vivekananda spent almost one whole day. So he was so enthusiastic and he wanted to write a biography of Sri Ramakrishna. It was Swami Shardanandji who supplied him the material. Obviously, uh, Max Muller was so impressed by Swami Vivekananda, but Swami Vivekananda had other work to do. So he would not have suggested the name, or he in fact wrote to Swami Shardanandji. And when Shardanandji came to England, he supplied him with all the materials which have now been published as Sri Ramakrishna, His Life and Message, which Max Muller published from Oxford University. It's a small book, His Life and Sayings. His Life and Sayings, which Max Muller did not even edit. If you see the original manuscript which Swami Shardanandji wrote for him, based on which he published that book. Max Muller being so busy in those days, translating all the books on Buddhism and sacred books of the East. It's a huge project, so many, more than 50 volumes. So obviously he didn't have time, but still he was so impressed and he wanted to publish this biography of Sri Ramakrishna. So whatever they say, whatever uh, Swami Shardan, material Shardanji gave, he maybe edited a little bit and just published the text as it is. And Sri Ramakrishna, His Life and Sayings, published in 1900, was so popular, at least among the English reading English readers, and it was the only authoritative biography of Sri Ramakrishna written by a Westerner in those days. So you can imagine why Swami Vivekananda selected him to write this biography. He had that capacity. And he was of a very cool temperament. He would not, out of enthusiasm, whenever normally biographers are biased towards their masters, or when they write a biography, obviously they think they should project him. Most of the biographers of the Mughal period, if you see the kings, they were employed by the kings to write their biography. Naturally, they have to praise their masters. So there will be a lot of exaggeration. Whereas here, because Swami Shardananji was very clear that none of the incidents, and Swami Vivekananda had warned him because he knew this was the role he was destined to play, to write a comprehensive biography of Sri Ramakrishna, when so many smaller biographies in Bengali were appearing, which Swami Vivekananda was not happy. He said, people with the limited understanding cannot write a biography. If it is to be a hagiography, as it is known, biographies of great people, then it has somebody equal to the task, one who has understood him, intuitively understood, and is very objective in his approach, without any bias, should write this biography. So, Swami Vivekananda was preparing him. He knew his life was short, passed away at the age of 39. So, naturally, he had tremendous trust on Swami Shardanji. That's what is very clear from the way this biography has been written. But at the same time, it was with the blessings of Holy Mother Sharda Devi. You see, we do not realize that this is not something that can be attempted by a normal human being. It's a human energy or human capacity is not enough to describe the wonderful spiritual life of such a great person. So naturally, he, and that is very clearly indicated by the fact that he could not complete the biography after the passing away Srima Sharda Devi. When people said, how can you leave this biography incomplete? The last few days of Sri Ramakrishna he could not write. And it has been, he could not write it. So when he was again and again, because he lived much longer after the passing away of Holy Mother. So the only remark he made when he was repeatedly pressed to complete this biography, only a little portion is missing towards the end. So when Sardanji was asked, he said, I don't know why, but I cannot gather energy or strength to finish this. And people knew that it is the passing away of Holy Mother Sharda Devi that resulted in such a situation. So, as long as she was there, I think a strange power inspired him, cleared his understanding, and that is why we find him writing this biography, sitting in a room. Even if today, if you go visit that house in Calcutta, which is known as Mother's House or Udbodhan, and see the room where he sat, and imagine that was the room which he used for receiving visitors. Most of them were crazy people who used to come and harass Holy Mother there. There's people, out of exuberance of devotion, they would be coming for various purposes. Some would come for material benefit. There's so much of crowd used to come. So one of his main, he used to jokingly say, I am the watchman of Holy Mother here. That was his main role. And sitting in, because that's why he chose a room, though it was a very, very small room, hardly a room where a scholar could write a book, a biography of such a great person. But he sat there with a small desk where he used to sit with his pen. And along with that, there were not only crazy people coming, the people, the poor women of the neighborhood who used to come to him just to put their savings. They did not know what banking was. There was hardly, they were all illiterate women who collected a little coins and for their future. And they would trust Swami Shardanji and very patiently used to collect all the money, keep it in his safe, keep an account. They would come to withdraw. It was like a mini bank for these old women of Calcutta. So imagine doing that, looking after, trying to control the crowd that used to visit Holy Mother towards the end of her life. And in the spare time that he got, maybe a few hours of silence, or when the house, when the Udbodhan was closed, he would sit and complete his biography. And even he used to write this biography. They say in the introduction we read that even while these people were coming, he would not be bothered by the noise or the interruptions that he had to face because of this constant flow of visitors. Most of them were unpleasant experiences, if you see his biography. So we can see a similar trend of Swami Sharadananda, which has been so beautifully published. It's come in the form of a book by an American woman, Vandana Jani, who has written this biography, and she has aptly titled it uh, "Like a Rolling River Free." Like a rolling river, it doesn't bother about it just flows in a very natural and spontaneous way. No matter how much obstruction is there, it just surmounts all those obstructions and finds its way to the ocean. So she has described Swami Shardananji as a person and named the biography very aptly as like a rolling river free. So I was just reading a few chapters. So, of course, America and England in those days and Europe, where he had to work for just 2 or 3 years, was much more disciplined, much more compared to his life in India in those days. So naturally, but still, there were a lot of difficulties, financial difficulties, difficulties he had to face on account of the jealousy of the Christian missionaries, especially in America. In England, he was much better off. He had good friends among the English people, and he had a much better time here. Unfortunately, he had to leave for America because Swami Vivekananda wanted his American work to be first placed on a firm foundation. And he did it very beautifully, taking very nicely, very capably, till he was called back. So, this book, I'm just giving you this background because to write what he has written here, though he had previously helped Max Muller to write his biography, which incidentally became very famous. Sri Ramakrishna, His Life and Sayings. It sold several copies in Europe, and as well as Josephine MacLeod, who was a disciple of Swamiji, in fact, took that book and asked many of the famous writers in Germany, Spain, and also France, Roma Rolla, who wrote another biography in French, and she sponsored all these things. Those things were done in the West uh, because any project that was dear to Swami Vivekananda was dear to Josephine MacLeod. She felt her whole life, if you see, it was just to help Swami Vivekananda in his mission. And she was shocked when Swami Vivekananda passed away at the age of 39. And for 2 years, it took her to recover. But once she recovered, once she heard a sentence where somebody was saying, he read this sentence that if you really respect and if you have been inspired by anyone while he was living and the person or the uh, personality passes away, then the best tribute you can pay to that person is by doing his work rather than lamenting uh, or trying to be depressed. So for 2 years, it was a shock. At the age of 39, she never expected. She had just left India, and she got the telegram that he passed away. She was in England. After that, after this, she came across this. You have to show by your life that you have been inspired by this personality. And the rest of her life, till the age of 92, she took this not only Swami Vivekananda's, Sri Ramakrishna's biography, but even Swami Vivekananda's, whatever little was published, she went to France, she went to Italy, she went to whoever. Whenever she found a great scholar, she wanted these books to be translated so that people will benefit. People in Europe, people in other countries who cannot read English. She spent her whole life there. So much inspiration was there. So here also you will find when Swami Shardananji is writing this biography, as I said, sitting in that small room in Calcutta, full of, noise and constant flow of visitors coming to see Holy Mother, looking after her needs, and at the same time being the chief administrator of the whole Ramakrishna Mission activities. In those days, they had already had 5 or 6 centers like Banaras, Mayavati. So he had to look after the administration sitting in that small room where you can hardly walk. It may be a 10 by 10, 12, 10 by 12 feet room. And sitting there, he is writing this biography. So you can imagine, and the type of spiritual capacity or the spiritual temperament he had in this noisy place to write this biography. So anyway, here he says there is nothing beyond my experience that I have written here. So when we talk about any of these visions, and on the other side there was a warning, very strict warning given by Swami Vivekananda that don't make the mistake of including any miracles in his biography. He was no doubt there would have been many things which appear as miracles, like curing certain people, but that actually is a very, you may say, low estimation of a spiritual person. Curing certain things, doing certain things which are termed as miracles. Swami Vivekananda believed they, in fact, uh, distract the person who is reading that biography, from the real purpose and goal of that person, because miracles are not part of religion. And he vehemently opposed. He said, just you have to interpret all the incidents of his life in a very rational way, which he did, which is very obvious, but keep out miracles altogether. He knew in the past most of the disciples of these great prophets, and they were so obsessed with the miracles. And in those days, the theosophy movement was going on in England. And they were, though no doubt they were losing strength because of the fantastic claims they made of Mahatmas coming, and all sorts of strange things were preached in the name of theosophy. They earned a bad name. No doubt that was true, but he did not want that to be repeated. He did not want Hinduism to be described as a religion full of spooky things, which was there in every religion, not that witchcraft and other things were there as part of many other religions. But he said that is an insult to the spiritual person. That is not part of true religion. If these spooky things somehow enter religion in through the back door, which he was afraid. In Chennai, when one of the theosophists, took credit for his success in America, he just opposed it, not because his ego was hurt, but they were claiming the whole theosophy, the philosophy of theosophy, which uh, had unfortunately been hijacked by people who believed in all these spooky things. He said that will give a bad name to Vedanta and Hinduism. So he vehemently opposed it, not for his own sake, not for the fact that he was, in fact, they tried his best to see that he did not succeed in America, and he had enough proof of that. But he wanted to save his people, that is the Indians, from this faulty interpretation, or you may say most dangerous interpretation of spirituality, which is running after these miracles. So at the cost of displeasing a lot of important people like Sir Ramaswamy Iyer, who were all respected and reputed people of Chennai in those days, he, in front of them, he launched he criticized this whole movement, which was hijacked by some people like Colonel Olcott, Madame Blavatsky, and all. They had become the people who uh, interpreted theosophy in a very peculiar way and depended on all these spooky things, Mahatmas from Tibet who will come and heal people and all those things. And Swami Vivekananda, as I said, he was terribly opposed to these things because he knew they will never bring any good. In fact, in wherever he went, especially in Europe, yesterday we were reading a letter. So there was a gathering in Paris when he was traveling in Europe, where all these occult people gathered. He would not have accepted that invitation, but somehow they gathered together. And he made a lot of fun. Somebody was talking about the benefits of worshipping the moon or the sun, and all sorts of spooky things were going on. And then he felt, of course, he just dismissed it as a joke. And fortunately, there was Sister Nivedita Margaret Noble and Josephine MacLeod, who immediately scattered this whole audience, thinking that it is going too far. I mean, everybody was coming and expressing strange opinions about Eastern religions, what they had understood as Eastern religions, taking some silly miracle mongering and other things, and presenting them as their interpretation of Hinduism. So that whole gathering in Paris was, as Swamiji says, it's like a gathering of clowns trying to establish a philosophy which has nothing to do with Vedanta, which is not only rational but completely spiritual in nature, which will ennoble a person rather than make him run after these spooky things, which will, in the long run, as he said, will weaken a person. Running after these miracles, running after these mysterious things, and miracle mongering would, in fact, make a person weaker than what he was before. That will make him uh, depend on his own strength less. And he had to give 2 or 3 talks in during his second visit, Man the Maker of His Own Destiny, where he says it's better to die than follow these astrologers. Because if a person becomes too much obsessed with something of the future, not trying to work for whatever he wants to achieve and focusing on the present, if one is too much obsessed with fortune telling, future, stones, and all those things, then he said that life is not worth living. In fact, in this famous talk, I'm telling this because before this biography was written, Swami Vivekananda very clearly told Sardanaji, don't write a biography which, like the other householder disciples, they were trying to attribute certain miracles, like curing certain people, to Sri Ramakrishna. He found this is a very dangerous trend. So he said, if certain stars and planets and twinkling stars decide my fate, he gave a famous lecture when he was asked his opinion about astrology. He said, it is better, he says, if your life depends on those twinkling stars and planetary positions, it is better to die than live such a uh, ill fated life. So he said, it is man, Vedanta teaches especially. He said that man is the maker of his own destiny. If it gives him strength, if it gives him courage to face all the difficulties of life and stand upon his own strength, then that religion is good. Otherwise, any religion that teaches you to depend on others, or especially the spooky things, then he was of the firm opinion it is better that a person dies than live such a miserable. So, here, if you see, the description that Swami Shardan is given has to be looked at from a purely spiritual point of view. So there is no, though most of these visions that Sri Ramakrishna had, which he described in his own words, they are deep psychological truths. There's a beautiful book which Professor William James, who was a great friend of Swami Vivekananda, they were all rationalists, they were great philosophers. So he was pretty much amused when he heard of the wonderful divine life of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and all Buddha and all the things, and many other Eastern saints. He said, are these visions not hallucinations? They just look like hallucinations. Psychologists would not accept it. So to tell him, to convince him, was so difficult. He was a famous psychologist and also a philosopher when Swami Vivekananda met him in America, but he became a great friend. And then later on, as a result of their interaction, he wrote a wonderful book, Varieties of Religious Experience. So, because you can't just dismiss religious experience, saying the visions of the great saints of any religion, even Christianity. If you see the Spanish saints, the mystic visions, if you just say, just because you cannot scientifically establish it or cannot convince yourself, to say that visions are hallucinations would be denying the religious history of mankind. These noble people, this Saint Teresa of Avila, you'll find hundreds and hundreds of Spanish mystics and other uh, following Christ. They also, of course, there are miracles in their lives also, which have been unfortunately highlighted. But what about the visions? What about the noble life that they led? What about the renunciation they had? Christianity would not have thrived without these saints. It is not the theologians or the churches that have established Christianity. It's the life of these saints. Saint Francis of Assisi, if you see, the wonderful life. If you go to, there's nothing miraculous about the visions they had. They had noble aspirations. They really worshipped Christ in spirit, not materially, as most of us worship our gods for our material benefit, to earn some money, to earn some property, to get some property, and we want God for our material uh, desires. Or most of the people follow religion for those things. But there are always in every religion, it's not just in Hinduism, but you will find it in Christianity, find it in Sufi Islam, where people really followed the life of spirit as the prophets had shown. And they were not ordinary people. Jesus Christ would not have influenced millions and millions of people. Buddha would not have influenced millions and millions of people if they had not stood for the life of the spirit, dominance of spirit over matter. So Swami Vivekananda was very keen that any biography, especially a spiritual biography as the great master, should not be written without conveying this idea, the progressive reading of spirit into matter. That is what was the main message. That is what Jesus Christ stood for. That is what Buddha stood for. Otherwise, they were all kings. Buddha was a king. He was definitely, he was belonged to the royal family. He need not have renounced the world and gone to the forest in search of nirvana or something to do with the spirit, the eternal spirit. All these great prophets, if they were wrong, if their spiritual visions were wrong, if their spiritual message was wrong, then we would not have this huge, entire human race following them for several centuries. Any uh, uh, anybody who is not genuine and does not have that spiritual message to give, that movement will die. It won't survive. It's only the prophets and the great people who have not only spoken about spirituality but realized that spirit in their own lives. That is why they make a difference. If you see the Oxford Dictionary or any dictionary, they say hagiography is about people who, for whom spiritual experiences, spiritual life was more important than their historical existence. They may have lived for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, as most of these prophets lived. Some might have lived for a long, might have had a very long life like Buddha. He lived for more than 80 years. So it doesn't depend on how long they lived and what are the historical events that form part of the biography. If there is enough spiritual content which cannot be appreciated by the common man, somebody has to write it after intuitively understanding those incidents, then it is known as hagiography. They don't call it a biography. So this is, in fact, when Aldous Huxley was the brother of Julian Huxley, who also wrote some wonderful books. He was a disciple of Swami Prabhavananda for Hollywood Center. So he wrote a beautiful book. He also, something similar to William James, Varieties of Religious Experience. He wrote an introduction. He was asked to write a introduction to the gospel when it was first published. A translation from the Bengali original, Sri Sri Ramakrishna Kathamrut, was first published in English as a comprehensive book. The whole gospel was translated in 1942 by Swami Nikhilananda into English. And Aldous Huxley, who used to be living in America, his brother Julian Huxley was a biologist living here in Cambridge, but uh, his brother wrote, uh, a, he had his own understanding. Of course, it was an incomplete understanding, but he wrote a beautiful foreword. And he says, this book, I mean, he is referring to the teachings of Ramakrishna, not this book, which is also full of Sri Ramakrishna's teachings. He said, such a beautiful hagiography, he calls it a hagiography, not a biography, the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, he says, has never been written before, because he had a very, obviously he was an American, English by birth, but American, he used to live in America. He was an American citizen. So he said that I have never come across such a minute description of a spiritual life of a person who has inspired thousands of people. So he gave the credit to M, and M, Master Masha Mahendranath Gupta, never took credit. He said, I've just recorded what I heard. It's a most faithful recording of what Sri Ramakrishna spoke about his own life, about his own experiences, and about the significance of his visions and everything that happened in his life. So that was recorded only for 4 years, from 1880 to February, when M. Mahendranath Gupta first met Sri Ramakrishna, and 1886, August 15th, 16th, when he passed away. So it was just a record of only 4 years, whereas Sri Ramakrishna's life, I mean, you may say divine life, had started much earlier in 1836 in Kamarpukur, and then later on in Dakshineshwar, where neither Mahendranath Gupta nor Swami Shardananji were witness. They did not have first-hand information. So, as other biographers do, they have to take the help of other people who might have seen the master, seen Sri Ramakrishna during his childhood. Many of them were alive. As I said, he took a lot of pains to cross verify all these incidents and try to understand the significance of each one of the incidents in as far as possible in a chronological manner. That's a difficult task, because Sri Ramakrishna said various things uh, during his conversations. He would himself say, this was what I experienced. This So many of these things, which are based on the first-hand experience of either heard by Shardanji himself or some of the Guru Bhais, his brother disciples, who recorded all these things, and then sitting in this room, small room, very noisy room, he had the uh, concentration and the capacity to write such a wonderful biography. That is why I'm saying, even if a casual reading is not enough, because we cannot read it, especially when people come here for some kind of formal initiation into spiritual life. If they are asked to read this book, they make a big face. Oh, do we have to read this book? There are smaller biographies of Sri Ramakrishna available. Can we not read that? But if you even want to pass a school examination, you have to read several books. People don't bother reading to get a good grade. But if you ask, just read this great master, I can show you people who are claiming that they are regular devotees who have not read this book from first page to last page. That's the least that one can be. I'm telling this to our online audience also. It has to be taken seriously, even if it takes a lifetime. Everybody complains that he doesn't have time. You have time to read all sorts of trash. We have time for that. And we can't read a biography which is considered to be not by some of the greatest Western minds, including Roma Rolla in France, who got Nobel Prize for his French biography. Uh, French, in all languages, it has been translated, but mainly it was written in Bengali. in Udbodhan, published in 5 volumes. But fortunately, two writers, one was Swami Jagadananji, who first translated it long ago as Sri Ramakrishna, the Great Master, and a better, slightly better translation, or you may say slightly lucid translation for the modern readers, because this is written in Victorian English. This was written much before India got independence. So naturally, that English is not, especially in America, they would not appreciate this translation. So Swami Chetananji recently published Sri Ramakrishna and his Divine Play. He's trying to be as literal as possible because he has had a team of editors in America, very exceptionally uh, wonderful editors who team of editors who helped him from to translate line by line from Bengali into English. But whether it is that book or if people are happy with this great master, which is also a wonderful translation, written by another Swami who was a disciple of Holy Mother and who had the capacity to intuitively understand the Bengali. Translation is, mind you, is not so easy. You can understand a biography or any message of a person or a great person, especially in the vernacular language, the local language in which it was written or spoken, and it makes a huge difference if you are fortunately able to understand the original. For example, the biography of Ramakrishna and Vivekananda was first written in French by Romarola. And later on, the French biography was translated into English. But if somebody who knows French, they say the English translation has lost its strength. I mean, no matter how good the translator is, the original is always better. So, since the next best thing we can do is, since we can't read, most of us can't read Bengali, at least such a wonderful hagiography of such by such a competent person as Swami Shardananji has to be read. It has to be read slowly and carefully. That's why we are taking so much of time, especially the sadhak bhava, the life of Sri Ramakrishna as a spiritual aspirant. And I've told this before, and I keep repeating why this part is more important. If you can't read the whole book, at least this second part is important, because for the first time in the life of such a great spiritual personality, his own struggles have been described in so much detail. In all other biographies, say Jesus, for example, how he got his experience. Jesus as a teacher, world teacher, there's so many records, gospel according to Luke, according to Saint John, according to so many things are there, but that is after. How did he struggle? What did he do in the desert when he called upon God, when he had his own experiences which inspired him to give this universal message? Those things are not given so much importance, even in the life of Buddha, the struggles that he underwent. What Buddha said after he attained nirvana, those things are there. So, also here we have to understand the struggles that Sri Ramakrishna underwent, not because he needed them, because he wanted to be a sort of case study for us. When we attempt to practice spirituality, we will encounter these things. We might have these experiences. Then where do we go? Whom do we consult? Books are there, obviously they are there, but unless you have some authentic text like the scriptures, you can definitely tell your experiences with the scripture. Shankaracharya used to say that is known as Shastra Pramana, means you have to confirm whatever experiences you have, whatever ideas that whatever you want to conclude after having such spiritual experiences, you have to test it and get it verified. Pramana means to verification by the scriptures. He says even a great saint or a great sadhaka or great spiritual aspirant will not just go by his own experiences. He would like cross verification. He would like to find out if the scriptures, the eternal scriptures that have been inspiring humanity for so many years, are they confirming my experiences? Or is it a one time vision or one time hallucination? Very often there's a thin line which divides hallucination and a vision. Why I'm saying this is because this whole part now, which we will be discussing, I had to take this time because we have to understand the importance of this. You can't just take it as a story or a incident that has happened and just dismiss it, then go to the next and then say, I've read this biography. Swami Shardanji is taking so much pains, not just to place the incidents before us, but try to tell us what is the significance. What is the significance and their present day relevance to us? Otherwise, why should we read the biography at all? It's not like reading a novel. Novels you read just for the heck of it. I mean, you just read it and then you finish that, you read another novel just to have some kind of variety. Whereas this hagiography or biography of these great people, biographies, they have a purpose to fulfill. They have a purpose in our life. We need to read it to ensure that we are on the right path first. And from the experiences that Sri Ramakrishna had, most of the experiences, as he has mentioned in the introduction to this second volume, the Bengali Sadhak Bhav, it is known as, means Sri Ramakrishna as a spiritual aspirant. So he has very clearly made a, he has given an explanation that I am describing these events so that anybody who is in this path and wants to compare whether his experiences tally with that of a realized soul or a great spiritual personality, this that is the purpose of this. It's not the incidents in themselves that we write here to praise that personality because we follow him. Okay, he had so many experiences, just praise him. No, are they relevant? These experiences, are they relevant in our life? Is there a possibility that someday we may also just come across these experiences ourselves in our life? And if they come, can we use this understanding of those divine experiences and to confirm? As I told you, there was this Swami Shardanji who practically, Swami Adbhutananda, who who could not even read or write. But when some experiences of the Upanishads was being explained, he was literally attending the class because he was forced to. He was just sitting in a corner and but when one particular experience of the Kathopanishad was explained by the great scholars, Swami Shuddhananji was a great scholar. So obviously he did not understand the polemics that were discussed, Shankara's polemics. It's very difficult to understand that as a philosophy. But when it came to the experiences, the Kathopanishad describes an experience of the deep meditation as a result of deep meditation on the soul or on your own Atman, subjective experience. So the Rishi had a particular vision. And when that was being described, that was when suddenly Adbhutananji got up. He hardly knew what was being discussed before that. And he didn't have the intellectual academic capacity to understand that. And that is not necessary also because very often the academic capacity to understand a thing intellectually clouds our genuine aspirations. They don't show you the experiential reality which is hidden in these Upanishads. Upanishads have to be read with that attitude. Very often, in the craze to understand, as a professor would do, and try to explain the philosophy behind that, and then you end up studying the Upanishad as you would end up studying physics, chemistry, or geography. And then again, absolutely, it is not relevant in the sense none of those truths have been experienced but by us. But when Adbhutananda saw the explanation was being given, he just jumped up. He said, what you say is correct. Not because he was intellectually convinced, because he had that experience himself, much before it was described. So he was happy that it tallies with the wonderful experiences these rishis had. And then Upanishad became relevant to him. That is why Swami Vivekananda, when he said, somebody asked him, why don't you write a biography of your master? Sri Ramakrishna, your guru. He said, see, I can't do that because for that you need that kind of intuitive understanding and experience those truths, which Shardanji obviously did. When he was asked, he said, yes, I have not recorded anything that I have not experienced. So perhaps he would sit with some incident of Sri Ramakrishna's life, ponder over it, meditate over it for months and for hours together. And then when he had a similar experience, he would put it down as a authentic spiritual experience. So this authentic spiritual tradition cannot be replaced by uh, people who write books just for the sake of writing books with a narrow or shallow understanding of the theology or the philosophy behind these experiences. If somebody attempts, some scholar or some, no matter how big his or now how important his degree is, uh, he may write something without having experienced these truths himself, then it does not have that kind of impact on the reader. That is why, and I conclude with this, in Raj Yoga, Swami Vivekananda gave this warning. According to Patanjali, who, who obviously in the beginning, the commentary of Patanjali's Yoga Sutra is very clear. He said, time is very short. You are not going to live indefinitely. So, Swami Vivekananda says, read only those books which are written by people who have had some kind of spiritual realization. Otherwise, you are just wasting your time. He said, if somebody asked me which are the books that you read, that is part of his Raj Yoga. So only those things will help you. All the other things, for understanding Christ, you don't have to go here and there, read so many, uh, have a course on theology. You can just go to the Bible, the basic teachings, faithfully and honestly recorded by his intimate disciples like Saint Luke and John and all those basic gospels. And if we can read with a proper attitude, you go back to the source books. As Swami Vivekananda told all the Hindu sects which were quarreling with each other, who could not get along with each other because of the wrong understanding of philosophy, he said, go back to the Vedas, go back to your original scriptures, and try to derive inspiration from the original work. The more you remain at the surface, the more likely it will be that you will miss the main point. So here every effort has been made by Swami Shardananji. That was the reason why Swamiji asked him, you have to do it. And of course, he doesn't claim any credit for this because, as you know, the day Holy Mother passed away, he said, I can't write a single line now. So that shows that some divine strength was there behind his writing this. He was staying in the same building, of course. He was staying in a room where Holy Mother stayed from 1910 to 20 when she passed away. 10 years he was in that. And in fact, he wrote this book to repay the loan he had taken to build this massive structure for Holy Mother. She had no home, as you all know, after 1886. Sri Ramakrishna did not leave any property. So she had to go from this place to that place, sometimes even go to her own mother and Jairambati when she had nothing to eat. So we know how much she suffered and how much a monk who obviously did not have access to funds, he had to just take a loan. And everybody warned Swami Shardananji that you are a monk, you are not earning, how can you take a loan? But he said, I can't let Holy Mother suffer like this. So he decided to purchase a plot of land, took a loan. Then they said, how are you going to pay this? Pay the loan. I mean, you'll have to pay tremendous interest on this. So he said, I'll write this book, Lila Prasang, and the sale proceeds, whatever profit comes. And that is how he repaid the loan. Before he passed away, obviously, some other people helped him, but he took the risk. So this was written under these very trying circumstances. So not a book that you sit, as they say in this building. Edgar Wallace used to stay, and he was a very rich man. Obviously, he had a dictaphone. He used to dictate 2, 3 novels. It's not like writing any novel, and he had so many people at his disposal who could take those notes and type it for him, and so many assistants. Here he had to do everything, administer such a big organization, look after the money, the small savings of these poor women who lived near Udbodhan. And he would never say no to these poor people who came, and at the same time repay the loan which he had taken. Imagine the type of uh, spiritual capacity he had. And amidst all this confusion and trials and tribulations, he had the capacity to focus his mind to write a book of this highest class. So the least we can do, that's why I keep saying that it's worth spending. I mean, the least we can do is at least read what he has written. So that is the purpose with which we usually conduct this class. Uh, it's not because as followers of Ramakrishna we should know everything. It's a really wonderfully written book, very honestly written book. As any rational, it's very objective in its approach. There's hardly any uh, subjective bias. When you read this book, you'll understand. He's trying to question, as if somebody who is very skeptical about these visions comes and asks you some question. He is himself raising a question. Whereas there would be hundreds of people, there would have been hundreds even then and even now, who would simply accept everything that is written. That is what happens with most of the biographies. We just don't even think. Whereas he says, no, you should not accept anything that is written. Does it tally with scriptural evidence? Does it tally with the experience of lot of spiritual aspirants of the past, of the great rishis of the past, of the Vedic? Uh, does it tally with the Shastras? So that is the approach Swami Vivekananda wanted. And that is the approach with which this book was written. So in the next time, because now we are entering into a very interesting phase of Sri Ramakrishna's life. I just had to explain all these things because the wonderful visions that are here, though Swami Shardanji has tried his best to explain it from a spiritual point of view, for many, that's why I mentioned the thing about miracles. It may appear as if these things are humanly not possible, the visions that Sri Ramakrishna had. But there was no reason why he should explain that. The experiences that he had, if any one of them were untrue, then he would not have spoken it. We all know that he was the last person possible who would speak an untruth. He could not, even if he was forced to, like his father, he could not speak an untruth even by mistake. So that is the reason why Swami Shardanji, though he has tried his best to argue, say a skeptical person comes, a person who was in those days influenced by Western logic, science, and other things. So they would definitely call religious experiences as a delusion, as Richard Dawkins says, the God delusion. The idea of God itself is a delusion for him. So that makes all the people who follow religion and the spiritual personalities all deluded people. If that is the definition, then all the religious, you can condemn an entire humanity into a category of deluded people. So that this is worth, uh, the so-called rational people should also have that kind of humility to accept that there can millions and millions of people over centuries cannot be wrong. If Christ was not relevant, if Buddha was not relevant, we would not have these religions, these great religions. If Krishna was not relevant, if all these spiritual rishis were irrelevant, we would not be studying Vedanta again and again. If we are convinced that these things, the very idea of God, if it's a delusion, of course, he may write a book, The God Delusion, to which, again, as I said, a scientist also came up with a rejoinder. He wrote a book, The Science Delusion. Said, your science claims that they have solved the problem. They can't even definitely say that this is true. And he has given a list as a scientist about the various delusions or various hypotheses that science is still adhering to, holding on to. without any conclusive proof. They say this may be true, the uncertainty principle. There's so much of uncertainty in science, in life itself. The very phenomena of death is so uncertain. Even the best doctor or the best uh, medical scientist would not be able to convince us, give a satisfactory definition of why death occurs. They may give the reasons that lead to death, but why at a particular uh, time or particular place these things happen to a person. So these mysteries, they will remain ever unsolved unless, in following the footsteps of these great people who claim that they can show you the path to immortality. Buddha did not just say, he was not just a dry professor who promised nirvana. Obviously, he had that experience himself, and thousands who follow him will have that experience if they are as sincere as he was. Similarly with Jesus Christ, similarly with Krishna, similarly with the Vedas. These rishis did not come for deluding people. If they have deluded people, then science has its own delusion. Science cannot explain many things. So the science delusion was a rejoinder to this book. But in any case, we have to. He has used a very scientific approach, trying to explain as far as possible, convince a skeptical person, a person who swears by science. Still, such people will find some kind of explanation. And it's hard to say that all will be convinced, no matter how good that book is. There's hardly, uh, you cannot say for with certainty that whoever reads or listens to this will be convinced, because that is not possible. Neither can a scientist convince anybody 100%. There will always be element of skepticism there, whether you believe in the truths of science or truths of spirituality. But anyway, this book, you may say, explains the science of spirituality, uh, taking basing his arguments on a very contemporary life of Sri Ramakrishna, which is uh, science which has been verified in the laboratory of, you may say, a scientific demonstration of the science of spirituality, if I may be allowed to use this word, because spirituality as a science was never, perhaps before Swami Vivekananda tried to write the books for yogas and other things. That was the first attempt, in fact, after when this age of science or age of rationality, to establish certain spiritual truths as a science, as a spiritual science. So this is a wonderful book, and we shall continue in the next class. Are there any questions? If there, we don't have time anyway. Shall we conclude? Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.